Welcome to another podcast with me, Rich Martin, and today is a good day. Partly you're listening, but also it's good because I get to speak to my friend Tom Lancaster. Tom is planting a church in Switzerland. He's been doing it for a number of years now, meeting in his house and seeing how all that goes. And it's a fascinating conversation, one where Tom opens up really openly about what is it like to plant in a secular city in a nation that really does not want to hear about God. The stats tell us that. And how's it going for him? He opens about the highs, the lows, the challenges he's facing. It's a really, really insightful conversation. So I know I enjoyed it. You're going to enjoy it. Let's jump straight into Tom Lancaster. All right, I am here with Tom Lancaster, who I've had the privilege of working with and calling a friend for many years, and his wife, Katie. And they were with a group of us in the UK in a city called Bradford, Church of Life Church. We were all on staff, had an absolute hoot together. And then Tom and Katie went over to Zurich in Switzerland and planted a church. Partly, we're going to find out why, but Katie is Swiss and Tom loves Swiss chocolate, is what he told me. And so there was no other way apart from going over there. And then I think God was in it taking him. But Tom, thanks so much for jumping on here with us.
Mate, thank you. Thanks for putting some time aside for inviting me and being interested in the story.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm excited to talk about it and spend some time with you.
Well, jump straight in, mate. Tell us for anyone, I know a little bit of it, but people wouldn't know. Could you give us like a 33,000 foot view of Switzerland, right? Why you're there, what you're doing, what it currently looks like. So, and I'd just love to tuck into that story.
Yeah, I think as a country, it's in Europe. Landlocked. No, we're in Zurich. We moved to Zurich. My wife's from Switzerland, so like we'd been married 12 years, and we would visit Switzerland. And whenever we'd visit, we'd be out like in the mountains, and I'd be like, "Let's get a day in Zurich. Let's go to the city for a day." And I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the atmosphere, the environment, the pace, the tone, the smells, everything. Like it was just, it excited me, and it did that for many years. And I loved visiting. I loved going there and hanging out, meeting the people. And I'd always had a dream to launch a church, and that was like from a young age. And I don't know why, because I was the shyest guy in the room, and for some reason I felt this like itch and prompt to. It was something along the lines of do something for God with your life. I felt that. I was like, yeah, I should be doing something for God. And I felt like the world needed another church, and it needed a church. When I was young, it needed a church that's done better than this. that evolved a little bit to a more mature approach, but that was always there. It's been there as far as I can remember from like my teenage years.
Yeah.
Me and Katie met at Bible school, so the same leadership college that you ran, Rich Martin.
Please call me principal from now on.
Principal Rich. We met there, and my plan was always like do a year or whatever it is of Bible college, and then go and plant a church. And during that year, I was like, oh man, I don't know anything, and I had no idea how to plant a church. So I decided to just get my head stuck in and build church to serve and be a part of it. And we did that for 8 years, 9 years, something like that, until the itch, like it just would not go away.
Right.
And I genuinely think it got to the point, Rich, where I was like I'm not unprepared. I'm not not ready. I'm just being flat out fearful and disobedient.
Right.
I know what I should be doing. I know what I should be doing. And that was just becoming frustration to the point where I was like, if I don't do something about this and listen and take a step, I'm just going to live my life frustrated. So we did. In 2019, we moved. Me, Katie, and our 1.5-year-old. We moved to Switzerland naively too. I mean, now I think about it, I didn't have a job. I didn't have any money. We didn't know anybody. And we just thought, it's got to be. I think I was at that point where I was like, I just got to do it. Never mind the details. Never mind the details. So we moved, and we stayed with family at first, and this journey that we're now on started to unfold a little bit and started to kind of make sense. But it began with this itch inside of me that just had to be had to be scratched. And I genuinely think it was from a young age, God leading me on a long journey towards launch a church, do something in the world for me that's a bit different and unique. And I had to respond to it.
But you went, and I can vouch for that, Tom. Like watching you was like, is he really going? He doesn't know anyone. We're praying for you, Tom. You know, we had the professional face that we're there, but behind the scenes, it was like, what's he doing?
Yeah, it
No,
was like
we were cheering you on. But what you've just described is what we all thought as well.
yeah.
So you went from what is a large established church in the UK, which and in a city that's cheap to live in as well. Bradford was one of the cheapest cities, probably still is one of the cheapest cities to live in. And you went from, you know, lots of friends, community to plonking yourself into where family was as well. Like Katie's family lived there, so there's obviously, I'm guessing that was in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Why not? Why did you do that? Why not just, you know, why move from a big thriving community? Why not just stick around and kind of plan out from there?
It's a great question, and I think it came down to just like, even though it was flipping great where we were, and it was working, and we're enjoying it, we loved it. At the same time, it was like I just knew that we should be doing something, and it was weird because at the time I couldn't articulate properly what we wanted to do. I couldn't say what it looked like, but I knew we should. I had a gut instinctual feeling that was deep enough in me to move me, even from something great, which for me is the evidence that it was God. It was like, even like if I was leaving something that I disliked, I was frustrated with, and I was like annoyed with, it would have been an easy like excuse.
Right.
But I think to leave something that was great, that I loved and I enjoyed, was evidence to me that it was God's calling and pull.
Right.
And it literally came down to like, I was like, I need to go and plant this church. Even if it fails, I need to, at least in my lifetime, I've said, I tried at least. Yeah. And we spent, I think 7 years, like part of the church, dealing with like, okay, we should at some point take this step. And it was a 7-year process of me getting to the point where going, I think now's the timing of it.
Yeah.
I couldn't have said why it was the timing, but once we got here, it made a lot more sense that it was like the timing of that was like, I couldn't see it at the time, but it was perfect.
And what I've loved about your journey, which I'd love you to unpack a little bit now, is, you know, you went from a kind of what I would call like Pentecostal, evangelical, traditional setup, which is big service, gather everyone together, worship, word, you know, all the great elements that we know of building church that lots are trying to slate and say it isn't anymore, but it's still going, it's going good. And people are doing a great job all over the world with it. But you kind of took to Zurich, like a different way of doing church methodology wise. Talk us through that. Why didn't you just stick with put the flags out? They all say welcome home, because that's what we all do. Get all the budget lined up, having the most incredible kids work. You know, the run the playbook, I think they say over in the US. Why didn't you run the playbook?
I think we stumbled into what we're doing, which again is what I enjoy about it. It wasn't massively strategic at first. And when we moved here, like I told you that we didn't know anybody. So I think we moved into the city in July. From July to November, we were in playgrounds trying to catch like eye contact with people. Like, hey, we're new here. Like, can we talk? Do you have kids? Do you want to come over for dinner? And we were literally like just cold on the playground, trying to make friends, trying to meet people. And with this idea of like, we're going to plant a church, and to be honest with you, we were a little bit like, let's run the play in our heads.
Right.
And then I think, give it a few months, it was around November, I met a guy in the lift in our building. And I kind of somehow had a conversation with him that we're going to start a church. And then a few weeks later, he just came by after work, knocked on the door, and he's like, when are you starting this church? I'd like to come. So we were like,
this week.
It's Sunday. We come over Sunday morning. We're having brunch, super casual, but why don't you come over? And it started like that. We were like, there's a person that is showing some interest. Let's just, what can we do other than like invite them for brunch? So we did that. And it just felt like that was the thing that made sense, was like, let's just, rather than like wait until we can do this big thing, it was like, let's start with what we've got. And we've got a guy that's interested in coming over opening the scriptures with us, eating with us, like fellowship, as we used to call it, just community. He was like, he needed it. So we were like, well, let's provide it. And then that kind of just kept happening over the last couple of years. It has just continued to happen where friends have bought friends. I mean, obviously that was November 2020.
Yeah.
When the lockdown hit
and on that, Tom, had you named the church at that point? Like, did he walk into the name of the church?
we had, but it was like, he probably didn't know the name.
Right.
I mean,
What? And tell everyone the name so that they all know.
Oh, the name's Kin House, Kin House. And that's two words we put together, kin meaning family, and house is the representation of, we want to build a culture of home where you come home and you feel at home, you thrive in your home environment. And those two elements, family and home, are a big part of what we want to create for people.
Well, scrap my welcome home banner joke that I did earlier, and I don't know, maybe if I come to your church, they are outside, so I'd cheer you on for them as well.
No banners, we don't.
Okay, so he comes in. Give us just context wise. So I think when you start talking a little bit more about the church, what does that now look like? A couple of the gates that you jump through to get to where you're at.
I mean, like, to give you a visual, it's Sunday morning. We do this every week. Sunday morning, we have brunch. So we have about 35 people that come over. We'll have brunch together. We have two big tables. We all sit around for about an hour. We all eat together. And then once we're finished eating, we'll all move from one side of the living room to the other. I'll grab a stool. I'll open the scriptures, teach. A lot of it is, I think what we're trying to do too is we have a tagline that we use like loosely, and it's good for the soul. And we're trying to create an environment. We're trying to create conversations and relationships and friendships that are good for your soul, because I think that is the pain point for a lot of people, specifically where we are. I think people are very successful. People have got a lot of money, great jobs, but suicide rates in Zurich are massively high. Wow. Which says to me, you can have all of this stuff, and you know how Jesus said you can gain the whole world yet lose your soul. I think the thing that's been neglected the most in a city like this, that if you walk into it, you'd be like, oh my gosh, it's perfect. It's quiet. Buses are electric. Trams are electric. It's like, there's no noise. No one's shouting. But I think there's a loneliness that's permeating through demographic here. And I think that was the thing that we were like, we want to create a space that is good for people's soul. And hospitality, sitting around the table, is a massive thing for us. I think it's the Message version of Matthew 6 in the Beatitudes when Jesus is speaking. One of the Message version translation of it says, keep open house. Be generous with your life, because you'll prompt people to open up their lives to God. Wow. That's a big part of it. It's like, if we can open our home and show people, it's salt and light, isn't it? It is, in essence. In Psalm, it says, taste and see that the Lord is good. And the only way people taste and see is if we are salt and light. So I think in a world too, where it is, it's in Latin culture, it is mi casa es su casa. It's my home's your home. And then in our cultures, there's a British proverb that says the home is a castle, which is like, there's a moat around, there's a fence up. There's like, this is my space. Don't come in here. There is something about, for us, opening our home. You meet someone and say, come to our house on Sunday morning for brunch. It is a bit like, oh, that's it. So I think straight away it is an inclusive, inviting culture.
And do you do worship? Is there any singing? Is there any kids program? Like, I'm just like trying to track in my head what it's like.
Yeah, no, it's super simple, and we don't do worship simply because we don't have musicians in terms of like worship music. But what we did to replace that was we do guided prayers each Sunday, which is our method of worship, because worship is, in essence, is saying, God, you're bigger than it all. You're above it all. And it's reminding ourselves how good God is in the midst of the challenges that we face. So because we couldn't do it and do it well, I mean, I play guitar a little bit, but I was just like, I can't do it. I can't serve bacon, play guitar, and preach a message.
I'm kids church.
Yeah. So we do guided prayers, and it's, that's a really, if you've done one, it's a really pensive, thoughtful, contemplative moment, which I love. And I think in the busyness of our weeks, it's so special to have time to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And then at the moment, like, the kids will get together, go out to the playground, and it's super just, like, at the moment, it's just casually, we're looking after a few kids. some of the challenges is like with what we're doing is how do you build an environment for kids to thrive rather than just we'll take them to the playground.
Right. And
Um,
talk to me about these challenges, Tom, because I've never been to your house. I'm looking forward to that invite, but I've never been to the house. And so I'm like, 35 people. That's like a big party, right? Like
yeah,
35 people in a home, or 20 to 35, depending on which way the wind's blowing. But still, it's a lot of people. So then, you're a church builder. You're naturally thinking, well, what could be next? Then you've got all these children. You just described the problem there. How do we make sure it's not just a babysitting circle and that they're input into? What other challenges are you facing?
I think space is a big one. At the moment we have a space that works, that's big enough for that, but that's not always going to be the case. I don't think it's that easy to get apartments here that have got that much space. So part of our thinking at the moment is what do we do when the apartment's full? What do we do? Because we don't want to just go, okay, it's full now. We're not building anymore. Sorry, you can't come in. It's like the complete opposite of the culture we're trying to develop.
And as a leader thinking through that, have you gone to a next step? Are you, you're not doing corporate worship. Are you thinking in terms of singing? Are you thinking maybe we go there then? Like, I just want to dig into where are you at with all that now?
Yeah, the whole thing I think is it's felt like we've ridden a wave rather than us going out and trying to carve a path. It is like this is what I think Zurich has needed over the last couple of years, and we've been very, I think, like what's going on in people. Let's respond to it. So it isn't to say that we're like like we're set on this method and this is what we're doing for the rest of our lives. Like for me, the method can shift and change. It is just at the moment it's working. And I think some of our thinking is how do we create space for growth in this method strategically? And the way Zurich is built is it's built in there's 12 different districts around Zurich, and each district is around 3 or 4 neighborhoods. So things work locally. Like you have your local coffee shop, your local supermarket you go to, the local school that is in your neighborhood. So our thinking is that eventually, like we will just open another apartment in another neighborhood and continue to do that until we essentially have kin house in each neighborhood across the city, which for me, I think is nice because if you go to the same supermarket as the people you do church with, if you bump into each other in the coffee shop, if your kids go to the same school, it deepens that sense of community, which is what we want. We want long-term relationship and friendships because as the Bible says, iron sharpens iron. I think it's that helps grow. I'd rather that than someone is driving into our neighborhood from like 30 minutes away on the other side of the city.
Yeah.
It makes sense for me that you do church with the people you do life with. And I think we're trying to strategically design it so that it works that way. And that is specific to the city. And that's what we've tried to do is go, what does this city need in terms of
But
strategy?
to celebrate you there, Tom, that's a great skill to have. It's like you've essentially picked up the rhythm of the city you're in. Because, tell me if you're wrong, but like I've never gone to plant a church like you have. I've been part of church plants. What you traditionally do is you go and you scan the world, via via the internet and friendships, and you
Yeah.
go like, which method is a good method that's working? And you go, well, that works over there, and that seems good. And we've been through all sorts of different methods, G12 or the kind of prayer movement or the lots of different ones, and you go, oh, well, that's really good. And then you go and attach yourselves to them, and you go, great, I'm going to take that method and dump it in my city and gather people around that type of thing. And there's some really good ones that have done it, and there's some great success stories. But what I enjoy about listening to you is that you've kind of gone and done a Nehemiah, right? Not to over spiritualize it, but you've gone and like sat amongst the city walls, and you've gone and like seen the ruins of people's lives and sensed what's in the city and then responded accordingly to it. And that is not, a methodology. There's a famous book that's called Missionary Methods, St. Paul's or Ours, Roland Allen, right? And the whole synopsis, I'll do a very bad job of it, but the synopsis of it is that the Chinese received the gospel from Westerners, but they went over there and they shipped candlesticks and they shipped all the robes over to China. And then they
Mm.
established essentially the traditional ways that they knew, and
Right.
and it wasn't succeeding. And it was like, well, yeah, because the Chinese culture is not one where they're going to wear like the traditional robes that have come from England and the candlesticks that along with the engraved stuff on there. It just doesn't make sense. and
Yeah.
the ones that grew their hair long and dressed in the traditional methods of the Chinese and embodied and embraced the kind of Chinese culture, that was when the gospel started to spread. And what I love about hearing what you're doing is you've essentially said, I'm learning how to tap into what is the Swiss culture and building accordingly. How do you continually do that?
I think I mean, it's a great observation of it. I think, I think being on the ground and I mean, what we do, like, we have 3 or 4 hours on a Sunday with people. So being on the ground, like friendships with people, listening to conversations, like I'm invested in the fabric of this city and in the people. And part of that is because we didn't know anyone, so we needed it. So I think we we listened. I don't know if it's partly my personality type. Like I have a strong feeling personality, a strong empathy, which is like has its pros and cons, but I can feel a lot what's going on in people.
Mm,
So being here, like the first thing we did was that we started to feel, and then I was like, well, let's just respond to what we feel. And another part of me is probably not always a good thing, but I hate borrowing. I'm more like I'd rather build something than borrow something. And maybe that's a good thing as well as a bad thing. But when we got here, I was like, there is a lot of great models. And we have looked at different models and tried to figure it out. And again, it came down to a gut instinct of I don't think that's what we need right now. I think we need to just like feel the pulse and respond to what's actually happening. And, I think 2020 and all of that stuff that went on, different countries responded differently. Different people had different needs. And we kind of just like shut out some of the other stuff, like put our head down and focused on what do people right here, right now need. And what came out of it was what we're doing now.
amazing. I just want to interrupt this great conversation with Tom to thank our partners at Compassion. Compassion are the most incredible charity that are based here in the UK and also around the world, who help relieve poverty in the most difficult situations going. And if you're a church leader or if you're involved in building church, can I encourage you to go and look up the work of Compassion and see how you could partner with them. The work that they carry out is done with such integrity and such passion that the two combined is really special. I've told you before, but I've had the privilege of going out and seeing in person how Compassion works and seeing how essentially your money from your church or your community or individually your money goes direct to the field to help people out of poverty. And it's not always the easiest thing to talk about because, there's various things going on in your own life. But when you lift your head up and start to realize that I could help someone the other side of the world, or our community could help someone the other side of the world out of poverty by simply taking the money that I have and taking a small portion of it and implementing it by giving it into the hands of the great work that Compassion do. So when I went out there, I was able to go see one of the children that my wife and I sponsor, and to see that our £28 a month that we give, of how it helps him and his whole family. He essentially is given a church project that he goes to on a weekly basis. He's given food there. His family's health and medical well-being is also kept on top of. And then also he's then enrolled in a local school, which sounds very normal when you're in the West, but in these countries that Compassion work in, it's also difficult for children to get put into schooling. And so to be able to see that, and then we're also given an app that then I'm able to communicate with his project. They print the letters off that we write as a family. He then writes back to us, and that is just a really good way of us being able to encourage him and for him to be able to just talk to someone that's maybe outside of this setting. It's all done so well, so safely, but it partners you in helping people out of poverty. So I am the biggest fan. I love the work that they do, and I want to encourage you to also get involved. So what about you as like a pastor, right? I don't even know if you give yourself that title. Can't imagine you sit on your chair and you go,
No.
Pastor Katie, will you pass me the Bible? Yes, Pastor Tom. I can't imagine that's all going on in your kind of gatherings. Maybe it is. Again, maybe I'm going to be shocked when I'm invited. But the thing I want to ask about you as a person, like delivering and looking after people, who are you connected with? How have you got your head around that? Like you read church governance in what Paul writes, you read how all that's set up. How do you go about making sure that you're not just going to spin off into some sort of zone on your own? Like, what does that look like for you and Katie?
Yeah. We don't use titles like pastor. And I
Oh,
tell people, don't need to call me pastor, please don't. And the reason I do that is twofold. But the main thing is I want to create a culture of honest honor. I don't want someone to call me pastor before they've got to know me and have this like immediate, like, I'm going to respect you because you've got a title. I want that to be earned. And I think that takes time and it's slow, but I'm committed to that. I'm committed to us spending time with people and earning. If someone says, hey, like, man, for me, I really want to call you pastor, I'll be like, all right, I get it. But don't feel like you have to just because I'm leading this church.
right.
Um, so some of that is just, it, I think if I'm honest, Rich, I'm fearful of becoming, and it's probably silly, but I'm fearful of becoming arrogant and assuming authority over people. And I want to approach that with some humility and care. And if it means someone doesn't call me pastor, for me, it's like, great. If it helps me like stay humble, if it shuts my ego down a little bit, great. That's probably a good thing.
Right.
So I'm intentional about that. I think one of the challenges is being in Switzerland, being separated in a sense. And we have good friends here, pastors, prayer meetings that we attend, WhatsApp groups I'm part of with other pastors. I have good friends that are pastors here. And I also do my best to reach out and stay in contact with people that have been doing this for a lot longer. I have conversations. I'll be open and honest about stuff. I've built friendships here that I'm trying to do my best to create space for, where we can have really genuine, honest conversations. I stayed out late last night with a friend just on the terrace with a fire, just talking about church and the
Nice.
struggle we're having. So I'm an individualistic person by nature.
Right.
I'm like you have to pull me back because I'm gonna crack on over here and do my own thing.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to put that leash on myself and be like relationships and connection and oversight is healthy.
Nice.
So make sure you have a bit of both. And I think there's a good balance. Hopefully, I'm trying to learn that, a good balance of being unique because I'm creative, I'm an artist, I like to do my own thing, but equally like reminding myself that I'm part of something bigger, that there is a tribe that have gone before and trying to tap into that. So a lot of that is relational. I'm intentional on building those.
And what is a major part of this story is like, they talk Peter Paul model. You've got the Peter model, which is he was employed by the church and took a wage from the church and was there full time. And then you've got the Paul model, which is we read he was a tent maker and didn't want to burden the church by
Yeah.
taking money from them, even though he says he could. And,
Yeah.
and what I love about what you've done currently is you are in the Paul model where you have your own business. Talk us through that dynamic and how you've kind of navigated there, because the reason being is because again, when you look at playbooks of planting churches, especially in the last few years, rightfully so, I'd say in some senses, is try and get a bank of money so that you can be a full-time pastor amongst your people, because the stats come out and say if you don't, you kind of like fall by the wayside and life all consumes you and the church never really gets off to a good start. You've chosen the opposite. Talk us through that.
Yeah, I did choose it. Like that was an intentional choice. And it was intentional because I think there's good language to put to it. I didn't want to burden the church. I didn't in one of the most expensive cities in the world. I didn't want to say, hey, before we do anything, I don't think it's a bad thing. I'm more than I have friends that are raising money right now and launching churches, and they have huge budgets, and a big part of that is salaries. And I think it's great.
Yeah.
Um, I think you need that in some senses because you need to be focused and give your attention to it.
Right.
So I celebrate that, and I don't think it's a bad thing. But I definitely intentionally chose that I didn't want to put that burden on our church that early. That I need a salary, I have rent to pay, and part of that was because I didn't want that in the back of my head. I didn't want to be like frustrated with we need more money, we need you to give more. And when we started, it was purely we want to offer something that is 100% service to people, and we wanted to lead with that. We're here to serve you. So initially, we covered it all ourselves. And
And
my
sorry, tell people what your business is.
My business is branding, graphic design, content creation. I work with churches as a creative director remotely, and which is great because it's the church world. So I develop content. I help people clarify messaging, create clear communication for sermon series, and design content for services on Sundays and social media, all of that kind of stuff. That's my world. I did that before. I freelanced like a little bit, but I mean, to be honest, it was the tool I had. And I was like, I came to a crossroads where I was like, I had a job when I started. I lost it in 2020 when all that stuff went on. And I kind of went, oh no, I've got like a month to make a lot of money to cover the rent and everything. How am I going to do that?
Quickly, Katie, get the tithing sheets out.
Yeah.
We're going to go hand deliver them.
Get some buckets quick. And I literally, I told to a mentor, and he said to me, use the method of 6 thinking hats, sit down with yourself and figure it out. What can you do? And I came away with, if you don't know 6 thinking hats,
Don't. No.
it's different modes of thinking. So it's like, you usually do it in teams, and it's like, you have a blue hat, yellow hat, white hat, black hat, and red hat, and another colored hat that I forgot what it is. Green, exactly. And it's like, think creatively, think strategically, think negatively, think facts. And you go through all these methods of thinking. And I did that for about an hour and a half and came out with, I should start a business. Like, I didn't really want the risk on top of everything else. So I tried to figure out the best way to make it work where I knew what I was going to be earning each month rather than project to project, trying to figure it out. Processed all of that. And it was a gift. And I think within the space of 2 weeks, I started, built a website, text a friend and said, I'm starting. And he was like, send me some stuff to post on social media. And I'll promote it for you. He did. I had one client, then I had another client, and it's gone great. And it's completely, I mean, it's full-time job. I have a day off with the kids, but it's full-time. So the challenge with that is building church alongside building a business where your time is split between the two. But I think maybe it's my wiring. I enjoy it.
Right.
I enjoy the pressure in a sense of like my time is constrained. I have to use it effectively, use it well. And I'm on my own clock, which is great.
And
You
so
know,
money that comes into the church, say people give, I'm presuming you've got some sort of way. What happens with it?
well, so what happened was people started coming to us and saying, hey, how can we help and support? Which is what I wanted. I didn't want to say, hey, can you start giving? I wanted people to, as a response, and you know, the story of the 10 lepers, like the ratio is maybe 1 to 10, that people start coming back and saying, how can I do something to help? So first it was, can we bring some food? And then it was, can we start financially giving? And enough people started doing that it works by itself. And I've, you know, with my business, I can tithe to it as well, which is great. And I was committed to doing that. So it works by itself in that sense. The money that comes in, we use for different things. Some of it is we did a project recently with some friends of ours that started a home in the Ukraine. The kids that were in this home, they were street kids that were taken in. They had to move from the Ukraine to Germany to essentially just escape all the chaos that was going on. So we did like a fundraiser to be able to raise finance to support them. And it showed me that if there is a need, if there is a healthy thing that the money is going to, people will give to it. And they did. I think we spent a couple of weeks like pitching it, like, hey, this is what we want to do. This is the idea. We'd love to be able to cover people's wages for 6 months while they looked after the kids, so they don't have to worry about anything. And we did. I think in 2 weeks, like our small group of people raised, I think it was something like 6,000 to be able to send over to them, which for me is amazing. A group of people coming together, generous, and saying, let's do something. So it at the moment with the model that we've got, like it works. We're not like more money. We don't have enough money. It works as it is. If we need finance for other things, I think our church would rally behind and would make it happen.
It's incredible. What would the Tom who went to Zurich, how many years ago was this now? 7?
3 years ago, we moved here. Do you mean when we first?
No, 3 years you moved. Sorry. So 3 years ago you moved here. So we're talking of a 3-year journey. You know, what would Tom and Katie say to the Tom and Katie now? It's a classic question, but it's a good one. Like kind of like,
Yeah.
you're packing your bags, you're going on the way to the airport. Someone pulls the car over and is going to give you a prophetic word. It's going to say what?
We had a few of those. Actually, I will tell you one of them because it's probably a good answer to it. And I hated it at the time. I was like, "Stupid prophetic word. It's just like generic prophetic word. It's not for me." But someone said to us, someone really close to us actually said, they had a picture of us in Zurich, and there's a lake in Zurich, and right next to it there's an opera house with a big space, a big square that's an open square. When you visit, you'll love it. It's really nice.
Is that the offer? I've asked twice now.
That's the invite. Yeah, you've been asking stuff, haven't you?
There we go. Thank you. Okay, it's on record.
Yeah. So they said we had a picture of you on a boat in the middle of the lake, and you had this whole party, but it was just you two at it for a long time, and you started to get a bit like, this, like no one's coming to the party. Which straight away I was like, yeah.
They'll be coming to my party. Trust me.
So when they said there was someone in the water that was like drowning, and you reached out, pulled them out of the water, and pulled them onto the boat, and like wrapped a towel around them or whatever, sat them on a deck chair, and then you turn around, there was another one, and before you knew it, you were just like dipping your hand in the lake, pulling people out into the boat, and eventually there was a party, and there were people on the boat with you. And I think now, like, don't get me, I'm anything I do, I'm like, it's not good enough. I need to be doing better. I need more. Like, any artwork I produce, I'm like, it could be better. I'm just like, I have a high expectation on myself. So I think what we're doing is fantastic. I think God's moving and God's definitely working, and we have great relationships with great people. Do I want more people? Of course. Do I want more impact? Absolutely. But this far in, there's people. And I think that first year, especially when COVID hit, we were like, is this actually going to work? I think if I wanted someone to say something to me, it would be just stick it out. It's going to work.
Amazing.
Keep heading in that direction, keep working at it, and be comfortable with the small stuff. Like, be consistent with the things that you value and you believe matter, and just keep doing them over and over and over again. Don't get tired of it. I guess it's that scripture, don't grow tired of doing good, because you will reap a harvest.
Yeah.
I think if I was talking to someone that was in my shoes like 12 years ago that wanted to plant a church, I'd be like, take off the expectations of launching this massive thing straight away, and be comfortable with the process. Like, your job is process. It is water it. It's plant the seed. God brings growth, but I had to get comfortable with, my job isn't growing it. It's doing the stuff. It's being diligent with, what do I think it takes?
Right.
Nuts and bolts, do that stuff.
Wow.
And I think as a church builder, I think that for me was the hard thing to get used to, is just, my job is just turn up, show up, study, stay connected to God, read widely, read deeply, talk to people, make friendships, be available, and just keep doing that stuff over and over and over again. And I think it's worked. Like, I think it's showing fruit. I think it's.
Oh,
worked.
no, Tom, let me jump in there and say, like, I have loved seeing what your church is like. I've not been, but I know people who have. I know people who've been on a Sunday to your church, good friends, and they've come back and gone, I want to be in a church like what Tom and Katie are building.
Mm.
And it's like, oh wow, like, and then just, you don't avidly post, like, like I said earlier before we're on air, it's not like you've got drone footage of your church gathering on a Sunday that's online. Do you know what I mean? It's quite subtle, but it looks really inspiring. And then you add into the mix that you're in one of the most secular cities in the world when it comes to people being responsive to God. I was speaking to someone in Bradford the other day that moved from South Africa to Bradford to run church, and their comment was, we just didn't realize that people were not actually interested in God, like, just not interested. And it was like their biggest surprise in planting a church and taking over a congregation was, as they've gone out to reach people just are politely not interested. There's nowhere for the message to land. And so to see that you're doing that in a city that has a similar setting where people, it's just like, thank you, but no thank you. I'm off to the bank because we're in Switzerland. I can say that, but I'm off to the lake or wherever it might be. I think it's really inspiring what you've done.
Thanks, mate. And you're right in describing the atmosphere. It is like, there is a genuine, like, I'm not even sure I believe in God, let alone am I interested in him or going to a church. And, a big thing for me was always, I want to build something where an atheist, a Muslim, a Sikh, a Buddhist, a Christian can all feel at home. And it's been one of the things I've tried to do, is create a space that is very welcoming and open to any of those kind of people.
Mm.
And we have people that aren't Christians that are a part of Kin House that tell people about it, that say, you should come to this. It's great. Like, it's really good. And we're having conversations about God with them. And I have people that have been hurt by church and they've gone through stuff and they've given up on church and they've gone, I'll give it another shot. And they've literally said stuff like, I don't think I would have gone back to church if it wasn't for something like this.
Wow.
All to say, there's a need, there's a gap, there's a space that I think we're trying to build something to fill that space.
Mm.
And as you know, there's some great churches in Zurich that are doing stuff differently to us. That's also, and we've just found our lane, and we're trying to run in this lane and do stuff the way we feel like it should be done.
Amazing. A few more questions, and then we'll wrap up there. But when you were moving over and you were like leaving, right? Leaving is like it's not really a talked about subject. It's so it is difficult, right? Leaving is just difficult. You read of where Paul had to I think he says he tears himself away. Was it from Malta? The people of Malta had to tear himself away. There is a tearing away from people, and there's a pulling away. And there was friends, there was family. I know you've got family in Manchester. There was church leadership. There was work situations. Like, what helped from that group of people, and what didn't help?
Gosh. It was tough. It was very emotional and we were very invested. So it was tearing apart.
Right.
It was a big separation. And everyone was very supportive, which I think was really good and helpful. And, as hard as it is, people were like, I get it. Like, as you know, it was like, it's tough, but we get it. And we know you've got to do it. So it helps having people, and people would, there were sweet people that pulled money together and said, here, like, this is the best we can do, but like, take this with you. And it was sweet, and it was great to have that support that just helped the process. And then equally, the challenge was leaving people you love.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we were building stuff, and as you know, where we were in Leeds, we just we just opened a new building. Our last Sunday there was the first Sunday we'd gone into the building. So it was a bittersweet, like, new season for this church. And for us, we're like, and I was invested. So like, a big part of me was like, I wanted to celebrate and still be a part of what was great. But equally, we had something to get to.
Yeah.
It's a tough process, I think, for anyone that's thinking about it.
What didn't help? What was, the reason I'm asking the question is I'm aware there'll either be people listening who are in the same place as you, or there's leaders listening who have got people like you in their church. And it's like, so that I'm digging around that a little bit without giving names away. You didn't say Rich Martin was an absolute nightmare. You can, you're good like that. But like, what didn't help? What would have?
I think the hardest part of it was once we moved, we were gone.
Right.
And it was quiet. I remember we spent 3 months in New York before we moved to Switzerland because of the time difference. I kept putting my phone on silent at night, thinking just in case someone texts or calls. And about 4 days in, there was no texts, no calls.
Oh, Tom.
And it went from, I remember thinking I had to scroll far down my text, like, to find a text. And now it was like, oh, there's that text from 3 weeks ago. It's like right there. There wasn't a steady stream of communication, which I was used to. And that's not a, like, I get that. I think sometimes you're so busy where you are that it's hard to look up and, we're the ones that moved. So like, we chose that. But I think for someone that's going to go and do it, and for someone that's releasing someone, it was hard. It was isolating.
Wow.
We were on our own, like, in a new city. I I mean, there was times I was sat in a room by myself thinking, what on earth are we doing? I don't know anybody, and I don't know if I'm going to meet anybody. And also all the people I did know are like cracking on doing their thing. So, it's hard to stay connected with people that are in a past life. And it's not that you need to burn a bridge,
Mm.
but I think there is something about that separation and transition that sometimes I think it's very difficult, but you do need it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm thankful for it, but it was one of the most challenging things was the isolation, loneliness, and just being on your own, trying to do something new.
Oh, Tom, I'm sorry for not texting you. I feel so bad.
Oh, it was part of the process. No, it had to happen, I think. And look, I was just as bad, I was like, I had a church to launch. So I was like focused over here.
Yeah.
It was just, I think I would say to someone, like, it's going to happen. The people you love and care about that you're close to are going to forget about you. And it's fine. It's normal. It's part of it. Allow for it. Get in the cocoon, transform, transition, like let the space do its work, because you'll come out the other side different. And it needs that. I think it needed it. It's tough. It's challenging. It's hard, but the easy route is not the better route necessarily.
Yeah, so good. All right, my last question. I'm asking this one. Thoughts on church in Europe? What are you excited about?
I'm excited about the church. I think in a strange way, I think making a comeback, like we've spoke about it, the church it's not the first thing on people's radar at the moment. It isn't. I think people are a bit like, yeah, I could do something else on a Sunday, or the community it's got its challenges. So do I really want to throw myself back into that? Or I think I'm excited about the church reinventing a little bit and reapproaching society, and people realizing, oh, that is a benefit. That is a value adding thing to be a part of in our society. And I can see that happening, and I'm excited for that. I still want that for people. I want people to find church, find it valuable to their family, to their personal life. I think church is good for your soul, and people need that desperately. So I'm excited about the church. I think in a way, making a comeback in people's mentalities.
That's so good, Tom. I'd love that, because that would be, it's that feel of this is the great church comeback.
Yeah.
That's what we're about. So good.
Yeah.
How do people find out about Kin House and Tom and Katie, or your business? Where do they go?
Instagram. Yeah. Instagram. Kinhouse.online is our Instagram. We're pretty chill and quiet on there. Primarily that's because I think at the moment we're busy on the ground, just like, so there's bits there. I'd love people to get in touch. Yeah. Kinhouse.online.
And your business?
The business is tomlancastermedia.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Any project that comes through this, you get 40% off Tom's prices.
Using discount code Rich's Tree. Is that a real tree in the back, Rich?
It's not a real tree. I've never watered it in my life. If you're watching online, it's on YouTube. There is a tree in the back of this video, but never watered it in my life, and it still keeps green, which is like the tree. Me and Jules on our honeymoon went to see the burning bush in where were we? Where is it? Egypt? That's where we were. And they swore to us that the burning bush had never been watered in its life, and it was still green. So, and it had all its leaves on. So they also got about $15 from us. So
yeah, massive tourist attraction. That's a good business right there.
Yeah, I've seen the burning bush, apparently, according to it. So, Tom, you've been an absolute blessing, and totally love what you've done. So, go check Tom out. All on the links he sent. It's an inspirational journey, and praying blessing and definite favor of all that you're doing in Switzerland. So, thanks for being with us, Tom.
Thank you.
Well, great there from Tom. I loved listening to him, and do go check out all that he's doing, Kin House in Switzerland, and hopefully you've been inspired. I am doing a whole lot more of these, and I want to say a huge thank you to Compassion, who have basically enabled and helped to make this happen. I've partnered with them because I'm passionate about them, and we talked about that in the middle. So please do go check them out, and also shoot me an email or a DM or whatever else you want. It's rich@richmartin.co.uk. I'd love to hear your encouragement, and I'd love to hear anything else that you want to hear on these podcasts. Right, have a great rest of your week.